record. And here they all come. Welcome to everybody who is entering the Zoom room. Welcome. I'm just going to take another minute more to wait for the last stragglers who are arriving, and then we will start the event. So welcome, and if you're not in Brisbane at the moment, imagine it's quite a balmy evening. It's been quite lovely this evening, actually, after a couple of very, very hot days. I always do a Brisbane weather report when I start events, because some of you are coming from all over the place. So just imagine you're in Brisbane. COVID doesn't exist. We're all gathered together on the back deck of Avid Reader with a glass of wine in our hand, shoulder to shoulder, lots of social contact, and we're in a completely alternative universe to the one that exists at the moment. So welcome to everybody. I might just start proceedings now. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on. In this area where I am, it's the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and I'd like to pay my deepest respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to any other elders who are here today. And also to acknowledge that because this is Zoom and this is a strange new, not quite in real life area world, we are zooming out onto the lands of many different Aboriginal people all around the country. I'd like to pay my respects to all of their elders and to say that this is Aboriginal land. It always was, it always will be, and that sovereignty was never ceded. This has been a land of storytelling for a very, very, very long time, longer than I can possibly remember. And we feel very privileged to be able to continue telling stories on this land now. So it's my great pleasure to host this event. For those of you who don't know, Collisions is a collection of experimental genre-bending lucid stories of the future from the inaugural Liminal Fiction Prize longlist. And the Liminal Fiction Prize was first announced in 2019 following Editor Leah Jing McIntosh's research into Australian literary prizes, which confirmed a historical bias in favour of white writers. The prize, the first of its kind in Australia, sought fiction loosely themed around the future. So it is my greatest pleasure tonight to introduce Adalia to you. But before I do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about where you can ask questions. So there's a chat function, and I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with Zoom by now, but just in case you're not, the chat function is where you can put your questions at any time and they will come directly to me. And just to show you where the chat function is, I am going to put the link to the book, see what I did there, in the chat function. So you can actually very easily click on that link and purchase a copy of the book. And because tonight we're hosting this event, there is a special 10% discount code. So if you go to the Avid Reader checkout and you use the word event, E-V-E-N-T, there will be a 10% discount on your purchase, and not just the book of the moment, but any of the books that you put into your cart will have a 10% discount as long as they're not an already discounted piece of work. So do remember at any time to put your chat in there, and I will be able to come back at the end and ask questions to the panel. So that's my bit done, and I'm going to hand over now to Adalia Nash-Hussain, who is a writer and editor. Her work has appeared in VoiceWorks, The Lifted Brow, Ibis House, Meanjin, and Going Down Swinging. She has been an Emerging Writers Festival Melbourne Recital Centre Writer in Residence, a Wheeler Centre Hot Desk Fellow, and shortlisted for the Scribe Non-Fiction Prize. She is the editor of VoiceWorks and co-editor at Liminal. Welcome, Adalia.
Hello, thank you. It's always weird having bios read out, which I am now about to read out more bios, because you write them down and they feel one length and then they read out and they feel another length entirely. Yes, hello and welcome to this event from Liminal. As we start, I would also like to acknowledge that this event is broadcast from the stolen lands of First Nations people. I am coming from the stolen lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation, and as Chrissy said, avid reader, are coming from the home of both the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. I would also like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of all the lands from which our readers are presenting in this broadcast, as well as those of the lands on this broadcast is reaching. First Nations peoples are traditional custodians of this country, and their cultures are among the oldest living in human history. I pay respect to the elders of these communities, past and present, and extend that to emerging community leaders. Sovereignty was never ceded, and colonisation is an ongoing process. It was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. We've got a lovely little event for this book that Liminal have published called Collisions. I'm one of the editors on it, along with Leah Jing McIntosh, Shertan, and Hassan Abul. It's been, like a process, I guess, getting it here from the prize, which I think opened at the very start of 2019, to the book, which is coming out now, and it's been really amazing and exciting, and it's feels unreal, I guess, to have it in my hands and to be looking at my grandmother in a small Zoom window in the audience. So it's very nice. So yes, we've got some lovely readings, and then we'll chat a little bit to the writers about the books. We have Viktor Krishna Centenarthon. Krishna is an aspiring writer currently studying medicine at Monash University. Mainly interested in writing short stories and poetry, his work aims to explore the dynamics of relationships such as the parent-child, the idea of belonging, and tackling the various currents which intersect to shape an identity. He's fascinated by surrealism and romanticism. He has won the Monash University Undergraduate Prize for Creative Writing and has been previously published in VoiceWorks. Krishna, would you like to read a little bit of your story?
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm Krishna. I'm currently on the stolen lands of the Kulin Nation. So I'll just read the starting bit of my story, Suburban Graveyard. Just turn the light on. Okay. Graveyards were running out of space for the dead, according to my dad, who was currently reading the newspaper. The increasing population meant that there had never been more people dying in Australia than at this moment, and our golden soil couldn't keep up with the exponentially increasing demand. Cemeteries were limited by the urban sprawl of the cities and had no room to grow into it. This looming crisis of where to inter our breathless, toneless bodies had, however, been buried in the papers by concerns over global warming and the economy and immigration. The synagogues and the mosques and the churches had realized the earth was not big enough to hide the dead and were starting to panic, according to the newspaper column. Would we be forced to place them on top of each other like shipping containers? Would we be forcing the dead to pay rent? Would we be hauling their bodies out of the pockmarked earth if they fell behind on their repayment schedules? This sense of alarm very much appealed to my dad, a man with an entrepreneurial spirit, but no ideas worthy of that entrepreneurial spirit. He was constantly searching for the business venture that would allow him to quit his thankless accounting job. He would read the newspapers every evening after coming back from work, gnawing on mango slices as he searched for inspiration. This impending graveyard crisis, which was still unknown enough for my dad to have no competition when devising a business strategy, was a stroke of luck that my dad was determined to capitalize on. We can lease our backyard and make it a graveyard, my dad said as he skinned another mango. The government will pay us for the space. We could create a business helping lease out other people's backyards until these white people learn about cremation. My dad's eyes were already shining with finder's fees and corporations and tax numbers. What do you think? He asked, looking at me. What about hot air balloons? I said, trying to contribute to this imagined macabre business empire, trading on future corpses. Balloons in the sky with floating coffins underneath. We wouldn't run out of space then, in the air, I said, imagining the fleet of balloons exhaling helium, drifting through the sky, coffins gently swaying underneath like wooden kites. Sponsors could fight for room on the billowing fabric of the balloons. The balloons could float around Australia, a juxtaposition of joy and death, serving as a poignant reminder of our mortality. Don't be ridiculous, my dad said, not even sparing me a disdainful glance as he started cutting the graveyard article out of the paper. The sinewy slabs of mango on his plate forgotten. Who would want their grandma floating behind their house? Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Okay, so next I thought we would listen to a beautiful reading from Babuk Syed. Babuk was born in Australia to Afghan refugees and immigrated to America as a child. They are a fiction writer, essayist, editor, and multidisciplinary artist who has published and performed work widely. They have edited for Archer and Un magazine, and they have received fellowships and residencies from the Wheeler Centre, First Draft Gallery, Punctum, and Vona. Currently, Babuk is a Missioner Fellow in Fiction at the University of Miami's MFA program, where they received the 2020 Dean's Summer Award. Babuk is at work on a novel. Babuk, would you like to read from your story?
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction, Adalia. I'm speaking this evening from the unceded lands of the Miccosukee and Seminole people of Turtle Island, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. So I will do a reading from the start of my short story called "The Revolution Will Be Pirated." I've been waiting out the front of Deepa's house for less than a minute when I beep the horn hard. A mechanical bellow tears into the Sunday morning of this quiet North Fitzroy Street. Ivy, the color of inherited holiday houses, snakes over fences, letterboxes, and colonial-era facades. A sight made to adorn tourist brochures. My phone vibrates with a text. STFU, I'm coming. I lay into the horn again and produce 3 shorter beeps that sound like an alarm and are more obnoxious as a sequence. The crown of branches above my windshield throws swarming shapes onto the cars that nurse both sides of the street. A man insulated from the cold by his waxed beard, de jour jeans, North Face puffer, and plump dad bod shoots me a vicious glare as he ushers his double pram past me. Breeders have no shame these days. I let out a quick beep for him, and seeing his scowl deepen, I let another one go for his soft porcelain babies too. Finally, Deepa rips open the passenger door. What the fuck, Dawood? Some of us are trying to marry into wealth. I burst out laughing. She leans over the gear stick and plants a kiss on my cheek. Now start driving before the neighbors call the cops on us. She starts clearing the space at her feet, tossing jumpers, shoeboxes, and manila folders into the back with the rest of my junk. I roll my eyes. It's important they know they haven't succeeded in wiping out all the fun here. Real hero you are with your car horn, babe. You brought Incy, yeah? She's sleeping in the boot. And you didn't tell anyone where we're meeting. Obviously not. Why would I do that? She adjusts her seat. I don't know, I'm paranoid. Hot shots kicked Mo and Munira out when ASIO caught wind. None of the other squats are letting them in. How come they can't stay above 24 moons? Deepa turns and shoots daggers at me. I keep my eyes square on the road to avoid her scorn. 2 harem pant wearing hippies skirt in front of the car, acoustic guitar and tree wizard pyro gear in tow as they make the pilgrimage to the Abbotsford convent on foot for a free Hare Krishna lunch. As if white crust punks in an illegally seized squad are going to want attention from Vic Pol or ASIO, especially not for a black Muslim couple. I guess you're right, I respond, brows furrowed. Of course I'm right. They're staying at Munira's uncle's in Noble Park for now. Hardly safer there, are they? It's not long before Deepa and I hit the M1, darting around monster SUVs, taking day trips down the peninsula. Traffic on the highway is sluggish, moving like gum pulled from the underside of a shoe. At the organizing meeting last week, Mo installed vehicle radius interface trackers, VRIT, into our car to help protect us from Vikpol's intensifying surveillance measures. The VRIT scans a 500-meter radius for cops and gives off an alert every time a drone, helicopter, patrol car, or projectile comes into range. The blistering sound of a drone approaching on my VRIT interrupts the bootleg recording of Spikefuck playing on the speakers. I watch it screen as the drone zooms overhead, heading southeast. Silence hangs in the car until the green dot leaves our radius. Little fuckers are getting faster. Deepa pokes her head out the window. Can't even see them in the sky anymore. I tap some instructions into the tracker. An angular gender-neutral voice announces that the drone was a Korean import, purchased by ASIO in November 2034. It was part of a jacked-up budget for anti-terror infrastructure that a newly re-elected Kyle Sandilands had both sides of Parliament unanimously supporting. Previously held tight by a revolving door of bland elites, Sandilands was a dark horse in the Prime Minister's race. And for society hungry for edgy rabble-rousers, yet still firmly conservative, Sandilands' impervious, no-fucks-given persona was the draw card, a maverick belonging to neither the unions nor big business, or so the people were led to believe. 3 months into his first term as Prime Minister, an expose reported that he was bribing Indonesian people smugglers to grossly exaggerate the number of refugee-laden boats being ferried over the Timor Sea. News of a renewed border attack went viral regardless. So that's where I might stop.
Thank you so much. So you're both revisiting these stories now, as I sort of said, you know, quite a long time after you originally wrote them. And something that I love, or I don't know if I always love it. I love it when I really like the work that I'm working with, about working in publishing, is how it makes me read and reread pieces and kind of come to understand them differently by the different contexts that I'm living in and the different contexts that I'm reading them in, whether it's surrounded by the other books in this collection or the other books that were the other pieces that were submitted to the prize, or, you know, those sorts of things. And yeah, with all of your pieces, I have these really strong memories of reading them for the first time as we were judging a prize a bit over a week ago, a bit over a year ago, and again kind of at the start of this year, when we were proofreading the book and starting to get it ready for publishing, and then again before this event, sort of preparing my questions and getting familiar with your pieces again to ask you questions. So yeah, those are all really different special memories, and I guess that's a really long way of wanting to get to how have your relationships with these stories changed since you wrote them and through the editing process, and now that they've been published in this book. Viktor, or Krishna, I'll let you start.
Yeah, okay, excited to start. So I guess like, it's, yeah, when like the email said, oh, the book's getting published, I was like, what book initially? Like I totally forgot about everything. And now that I see my story, like, it's like part of me is like very happy that I'm on like I've been immortalized sort of in the ink. But part of me is also like, there's so many things I could have changed. Like even during the editing process, when you were like, oh, you could change this and this, I was like, oh yes, why didn't I think of that? So I guess like this story represents like a snapshot of where I was. And I think also like a springboard for where I'm moving forward. If that makes sense, sort of.
Yeah, totally. It's been really exciting reading your writing. This was the first time that I read it, reading your short story that you submitted for the prize. But since I reread your poem that was in VoiceWorks recently, and I've been reading your writing at other places, and it's been really cool seeing people who I was already familiar with through the prize, and then also seeing people who I'm now familiar with kind of go on and publish things. It's been really cool. The like timeline of publishing means you get to see those kinds of things. Bobook, how do you feel about your story in this different time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I like will always appreciate it. I think partly like as Krishna was mentioning, because it's immortalized in a certain kind of context, but also because, especially like now being in kind of formal creative writing, school, and like working on a more longer term project with like professors and mentors who are like instructing about more like formal conventions of creative writing. I look back on a piece like this, which I wrote before I had any formal instruction in creative writing, or I had taken any real like, classes of that nature. And I kind of appreciate how, just defiantly like barging through, like bullet a China shore, the piece is. And I appreciate that. And it's something that all of my politics are still there, my relationship to queerness, how like disrespectable, all of these figures are, how they kind of buck trends of, pity and assimilation and trauma and, just suffering, which I think often with characters like these comes to dominate and occlude like the multiplicity of their lives and the complexity of these experiences, and often when we see depictions of them, they're always victimized, and we see their saviors represented externally, outside of their communities. And so I thought, with a story like this, it was really important for me to like do justice to historically how we have always saved ourselves. No one has come to our defense. No one has, and then also, to look even broader, that no one's liberation has ever come from the goodwill of their oppressors. It's been the product of like agitation, militancy, and not from historically, polite, respectable kind of appeals to the moral sensibilities of brutes. So for that reason, I really like it still, parts of it at least.
I really like it too. One thing I like about both of your pieces, but we'll start, Bob, with you about your pieces, is I think something that was really interesting, obviously the theme of the prize that we kind of had, which we sort of just put out there to be kind of like a vague provocation. Like I think we weren't expecting people to like be super strict with it or whatever, but the prize sort of theme was the future kind of thing. And I think by that we ended up getting a lot of really interesting kind of, I guess, like subversions and plays with like genre fiction. And Bobuk, I think your piece is really interesting to me because I think it has some of these really like classic like science fiction dystopia kind of tropes in terms of like, there's the like thing that can translate animal speech, and those sorts of things are like really and like scramblers and all of that kind of stuff. But then it feels like I think often dystopian stories occur in a world where one of the central mysteries or tensions is how did we get here kind of thing, and it's sort of unfolding like, oh, this terrible mysterious event somehow killed all these people or enslaved the human race or whatever. And I think without being didactic or anything, I think your story, it's really clear how we got there, that there's still all of these very contemporary, the system hasn't completely shifted. De jure genes still exist, like that kind of stuff. I really liked. It was still like incredibly recognizable and contemporary. And I guess, yeah, like how did you think about I guess dystopia and present day and how that fits in with your perceptions, I guess?
Yeah, I guess because I've spent so much of my life kind of in between the States and Australia, I feel like I've definitely observed this particular way that Australia and Australians like to rinse themselves of the same kind of dilemmas and kind of pitfalls that the United States and Americans often find themselves in. It's much easier to like point and laugh at the tribulations and shortcomings and suffering, that people on the lower rungs of America endure because of, poor policy and, the prioritizing of power and its concentration in the hands of a select few. And so I thought with a story like this, it was important for me to emphasize that the figure of someone like Donald Trump isn't unique to the United States. You know, that kind of populist maverick far right figure, you know, as we've seen in the United Kingdom, exists there, and it's not beyond the reach of our imagination and memory, present day memory, to conceive of the rise of a similar figure in Australia. So it was a kind of like fun, imaginative exercise to kind of parse through, you know, like the last 20 years of Australian popular culture and find, you know, a kind of short list of my own of like who that person could be, you know, and doing all this really geeky research into their backstories. And, you know, Kyle Sandilands is really, I mean, it sounds a little naff, but like his accelerated rise through having been wrong, through having been inflammatory, through having kind of bucked trends of like, you know, liberal political correctness, and precisely in having done so, has managed to accelerate his career is much the same kind of bravado that has kind of galvanized Trump and his base. And so I guess, yeah, thinking about the apocalypse not so much as some far-flung distant future, but like as the like most sensible outcome of the present path that we're on, rather than aliens are invading and some kind of critical incident takes place that changes everything. It's like, you know, the path that this country, or I mean, both countries really, have been on since, you know, their bloody genocide of colonization that has led us now will continue to lead us if it's not checked and, you know, severely intervened on to that most sensible of conclusions, which is like, you know, yeah, full-blown kind of police state apocalypse.
Yeah, totally. And I think what's interesting, like I think that the path to get to the dystopia is really it's very recognizable, but also the people who are fighting it are very recognizable. They're also not these like sudden superheroes rising out of the ashes or something. They're also the same people who are, you know, imperfectly trying to put together like protests and movements today still. Like I think that I really like that.
I also was just like thinking about how you know, my father, who's, you know, an Afghan refugee, told me something really interesting that stuck with me in light of like the recent couple of months. And he's like, in regards to, you know, watching you know, the nation of Afghanistan kind of collapse within his lifetime, that the fall of a country and the rise and onset of fascism isn't something that takes place in a recognizable threshold. You know, there's no point at which it begins. It's a slow and gradual, imperceptible decline of civil liberties and rights, and a shifting of norms that takes place before your eyes, while people are having sex, while businesses remain open, while society, you know, by all accounts, seems to be, you know, managing to adapt and shift gears around those shifting norms. And suddenly one day, the norms have been shifted so severely that you cannot escape, that the rise and the onset has become, you know, debilitating. And so I think that's also part of my thinking, as well as like kind of shifting that narrative away from this, you know, like, you know, kind of critical, like kind of threshold, or this huge inciting incident, and looking at it from, you know, the reality of how governments and societies collapse, which is not with a bang, but a whimper.
Yeah, I mean, without wanting to like cater too much to our Queensland audience, like even just like going back over the history of the Joh Bjelke-Petersen government, like there's like so many like norms are shattered and so many like insane things came out of the Fitzgerald inquiry and all of those kinds of things. Like Australia has had those things happen. Those things continue to be happening right now. Like, yeah, I think it is, I think you're really astute in the way that we project onto America something that we don't see in ourselves. Krishna, I was really interested. I think that your piece also brings in kind of like this dystopian futurism, but also it feels almost paired with something quite gothic. So kind of as the story unfolds, the narrator's like backyard gets turned into a graveyard and there's kind of ghosts calling out. And I thought that was just really fascinating. I think that the blend of that kind of, yeah, like there are like signals towards, I guess, that kind of sci-fi in terms of like, you know, I think the idea of like running out of space for bodies and, you know, those kinds of things like overpopulation and stuff are obviously like a big theme, I guess, when people are looking at like future sort of circumstances. And I thought it was really amazing and interesting the way that you kind of then blended that with something almost Victorian in terms of the other voice. And I guess I was just interested in hearing how you thought about that and come up with that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess like I was just scouring through The Guardian one day, and it talked about like how graveyards like in Sydney would run out of space by like 2030. And it just like really struck me like how finite everything is, because graveyards aren't something you really think of. They're just like a concept, but you think they'll always be there. And then just like, because we live in a society like a society where everything's commodified, I just thought that graveyards too would become like sources of commodification and everything. And then I thought like to apply that to like just like a smaller microscopic environment rather than like big corporations and everything. And I think like with your talking about how I was trying to like move things forward slowly, like I think like I watch a lot of like horror movies, I guess, and like my favorite horror movies all have like really slow descents into like an unreality. So like you can sort of see yourself slipping, but you don't really realize it. And at the end, it just sort of all explodes around you, and you're like, this is such a weird place. And you sort of realize how you got there, but like at the moment, it all made sense, sort of. Yeah, I don't know, like, yeah, so yeah, it was really just exploring that idea and then just mapping my own like relationships onto it. And then it just sort of grew organically from there. Yeah.
I think the relationships in both of your stories are really interesting. Krishna, you sort of explicitly said in your bio that you're really interested in relationships and parent-child relationships. And is that something that you wanted to put into this story when you were looking at kind of the relationship between, I guess, the father coming up with this harebrained scheme to lease out the backyard? And
yeah, so like I guess like as a second generation immigrant, like my parents came from Sri Lanka because of like the civil war there. And so when they came here, they sort of like gave up their chance to like fully immerse me in their like home culture in exchange for safety. And so like sometimes I feel like there's that huge space between me and my parents, because like they grew up in a different culture from me. And like when I like listen to like Bollywood and stuff, or Hollywood in my case, and I like cling on to those small things really fiercely, more fiercely than my parents do, because for me these things are like the only remnants of my cultural identity I have. And my parents are like so confident in their cultural identity and I'm not. And I feel like that bridge is something that like we'll always struggle to like get past. And like I try to like communicate that in my story, just we are speaking on like totally different levels. Like there's affection there, but like how does affection cross how does affection cross the distance between us, sort of? Yeah.
Well, look, I think like the characters in the center of your things, they don't necessarily like lack a relationship to traditional family. I think there's this really interesting moment where two of the characters are talking about how one of them is kind of always secretly, one of their mothers is always secretly hoping that they're going to get married and sort of never quite has taken in that they've come out. But I think it's also, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think that's not said with like this deep pain in their voice. There's like almost a tenderness in the way they're both being like, oh yeah, well, you know, she'll never stop hoping kind of thing. And but then also that all of these different characters also have a kind of complex, almost familiar relationship in terms of the way that they're sort of the honking of the horn, almost like pulling a hair or something. And like that kind of, there's like a sibling-y almost relationship between all of them kind of getting on each other's nerves. And I was interested if that was something that you were thinking about in terms of yeah, like family and community and those sorts of relationships.
Yeah, of course. I think it's definitely intentional, and it owes it's very you know, fluid, anti-nuclear form to, you know, queer conceptions of family, which have always demanded us to kind of build community, build rapport, build networks of trust and care in lieu of biological families, or, you know, in addition to them even. So, you know, when I'm thinking about, you know, it was an intentional choice for it to be Munir's uncle who takes them in. You know, it's like thinking beyond the scope of the nuclear in all of these people's lives, because, you know, I mean, the nuclear family itself is like the bastard product of capitalism. And so thinking about how, you know, these communities of like recent immigrants or, you know, overtly anti-capitalist, like it was important for me to kind of, you know, demonstrate those politics with integrity in the way they lead their lives and in the actions, you know, so that it's not just virtue signaling kind of, you know, just kind of like parading around with some, you know, moral sense of like what the best and most virtuous politics are. And so I think it was definitely intentional. And when I think about the relationships between, you know, the four of them and how, you know, they depend on one another for care, and they are intimate and tender, and their, you know, their presence in the cubicle doesn't kind of defer or deny Dawood's kind of access to pleasure through the glory hole, I think is really important for me, and was important in how I kind of conceived of that space as, and that configuration of people as an opening rather than a closure.
Amazing. Yeah, it was really interesting. So I think we're going to go to audience questions in a second, but I thought I would, so I'm going to shout out to the audience. There's the little chat feature. I think Chrissy has been using it to tell you to put questions in there. So if you have any questions and you would like to put that in there, this is now the ideal time to do that, because I am asking one more question and then it will be your turn. So the last question I wanted to ask, I guess is just about, I'm always interested when I'm talking to like writers and artists whose work I really love and respect, in knowing the writers and artists that they really respect, I guess, that you're inspired by, or that you're reading at the moment, or you were reading when you wrote this, or just that you see your work in conversation with. Krishna, do you want to start?
Oh yes, so I guess like right now I'm reading a manual for cleaning woman by Lucia Berlin, like just a collection of short stories by her. And I just find very interesting her exploration of different environments and her writing, which is like very sparse and clipped, yet like very evocative at points. And I guess like I also read, I was reading a lot of poetry around the time I wrote Suburban Graveyards. So I was looking through my Goodreads to try and figure out what exactly I was reading. And I think the two poetry collections that stuck with me most in that time was some work by Kaveh Akbar, I hope I'm saying that right, and A Cruelty Special to Our Species by Emily Young-Win Yoon. I hope I'm saying that right too. Which was about her experiences as like a second generation Korean American and experiences of Korean women during the war, and just just linking back to the diaspora, I guess.
Amazing. Bobo, do you have artists or writers you want to talk about?
Oh, so many. I think in relation to that piece, I would say, I mean, and that piece being, like something that I still, am in conversation with and haven't and wouldn't try to kind of, forget about or neglect. I'm thinking of people like Brian Washington, who just released his debut novel, Memorial, but also his short stories, Lot. I'm thinking of Brontes Purnell, who wrote this really incredible experimental text called Johnny, Would You Love Me If My Dick Were Bigger? I'm thinking of people like Garth Greenwell. I'm thinking of Brandon Taylor. I'm thinking of Randa Jarrar, Salim Haddad. There's a real emergence of people and queer writers in particular who are writing against the like traditional veins of affect and suffering and trauma that often our stories are mired within, and that's definitely like a huge motivation for my work, is telling artful and authentic stories of my communities, but also imbuing them with like a buoyancy and a humor that also represents a part of our lives that often gets neglected. And so I really appreciate writers and artists who are also able to do that.
Such a good list. So many good people I have to now write down and add to my my list. Amazing. Okay, so I think I've got some audience questions here to start going on. So somebody has asked Viktor to talk a little bit about the way that you use mangoes in this story, and how they're kind of the symbol with your parents eating them, or with the parents of the character eating them. And I've having read a poem of yours about mangoes, I feel like maybe there's a theme.
If you want to know about my relationship with mangoes, you can read my poem in voice words.
Oh my God, there's such a good story. If you want to know about that, you can read my poem. It's like, put that on your grave. Like, that's so good.
But let me just say on the record that I am categorically anti-mango. I hate mangoes with a burning passion, in case my parents are listening. So for me, mangoes are just very interesting because like they come from like a Tamil word, and I'm like of Tamil heritage, so it feels sort of symbolic in a way.
Well, mango for South Asians, mango lit is like a shorthand for that kind of diaspora lit kind of thing. So I think it's very funny the way that you kind of subvert that.
And like every brown person I know like loves mangoes. Like whenever I say I don't like mangoes, they're like, "What, have you tried this one?" Like, you're just trying the wrong kind of mango. Why don't you like
knowing the
mangoes,
specific
Krishna?
types of mangoes that you need to try is also extremely savage. Being like, no, none of this R2E2 nonsense.
It just taught me that the easiest icebreaker whenever I'm like with like people I don't know is just to say, what are your opinions on mangoes? I don't like them. And the convo just goes off just like that.
Great. So we have another.
They've almost
question.
been like They've almost been
No,
like
go, go.
memified, you know, the mango in the like on the internet in regards to like their place within diaspora. You know, it's become kind of, it's, you know, the point at which it moved beyond even cliche and into like shorthand, like you said, or meme. It's so fascinating that something as, you know, innocuous as like a fruit has really just like taken on this life and the kind of, you know, creative imaginary of like a whole generation of like displaced diasporic peoples and their readers.
It permeates everything. I remember when I was hitting puberty, my mom was always quoting Bend It Like Beckham, where it's like, oh, before you know it, those mosquito bites will look like juicy, juicy mangoes. And I was like, no, let me free. So we have another question from Flora, which is, which other stories from the collection have you guys enjoyed if you've read them? Bobo, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I just read earlier today the winning story. I hadn't read Bryant's story yet, and I really enjoyed that. I think it was really cool. I like how it played with time, and yeah, and the character was really strong and singular. I really enjoyed it, I think.
Yeah, my way of reading all of the stories, I think, shifted through reading that one in terms of thinking about what it was doing with time, and it really made me think about what all of your other stories were doing with time, and really appreciate both your story is one of the longest in the book, but it's also one of the most like fast-paced, like most action-filled, and I think that, I don't know, I found that interesting, just that maintaining a sense of like movement over a longer period than other ones, whereas some of the ones that are the shortest are kind of the most ethereal. And yeah, I don't know, and Jason, who couldn't be here tonight, but their story Couch Surfer is really it's an example of like a single scene story, which I usually I find I often don't enjoy stories that take place inside a single scene kind of thing. But it reaches back to like the previous night and previous relationships and all these kinds of things in this really like dense way, where it's really only the span of this really short conversation that the story is through, but then it goes back through all of these things. So yeah, it's been really interesting thinking about how all of you are doing that differently because of reading Bryant's story, which kind of does it, I guess. So kind of lays it out what it's doing on the page. Krishna, do you have stories from the book that you've liked?
I would like to say that all the stories in the collection are amazing, fantastic, absolutely breathtaking and everything. I mean, if I had to pick a couple, excluding the panelists, of course, I really liked Claire Cow's story. The title's escaping me. The author isn't, but the title's escaping me.
See You Tomorrow.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you, Adalia. I just liked her writing and the imagery of everything. I also liked Nectarine, partly because it's preceding mine and I'm quite up myself at times. But also because she just has they just have a way with words, and like the last sentence especially like really got me, sort of. Oh, and shout out to Jessica's story. Jessica couldn't be here, but I really liked like the dark humor sort of in her piece. Yeah,
I've kind of loved seeing people respond to the collection since it's come out. Like, yeah, there are some which I guess I feel like a inherent fondness towards, just because, you know, whatever, my taste, the imagery appeals particularly to me, but I saw you know, reading all of the stories, I thought they were all really great and had like really interesting different things that were pulling them. And it's been really exciting being like, oh, I was right, and seeing other people finding different ones that they're like, I especially love this one, and I'm like, I like that one too, but I wouldn't have, like, it's really cool to see someone else saying like completely different set. I think it's really yeah, and I think it really speaks to like the strength of the writing and the different things that you guys are all doing in the collection. I don't know if we have any other questions in the chat, so we might, just Chrissy has a face.
We don't have any more questions, but we do have a comment from Bianca, which I thought was a really nice comment to kind of round off our discussion, because she said that that she wants to congratulate every writer and contributor to this brilliant anthology, that this has just been a fascinating discussion, compelling readings, and just overall so heartening to hear the panelists reflect on their stories, their journeys, and what they mean to them. And I also thought that it was a really fascinating conversation. I love short stories. I love the fact that that compilations, even in this, you know, quite harsh environment for publishing, that that short story collections and compilations like this still get support and get read and find their readership, because there are readers like me out there who just adore the short story form and want to see the new voices represented like this. So congratulations on the collection.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, Chrissy, and thanks, Bianca. That was very lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I reckon we might be wrapping up. We'll let Bobook go back to bed. Chrissy, do you have some housekeeping that you want to wrap us up with?
Yeah, so just at the end of this discussion, I'd like to open the floor to people to unmute themselves so that we can have a clap as if we were in real life. It always makes you feel like you have actual people in the room. So I'm just ticking the box that says allow participants to unmute themselves. Congratulations on the collection. Do use that link and use that code EVENT, EVENT, at the Avid Reader checkout. You can get 10% off this book and any other book that you put into your cart tonight. So congratulations to the Liminal team, and go Collisions. And you can all unmute yourself for a final clap. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see the people. Yay, congratulations everyone.
Thank
you all, appreciate it.
See you guys later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.